Hi everybody, welcome to This Week in Irish History. I'm Dan Murphy from blueandgold.com. Joining me as always is our senior editor Lou Samoji. Finally, football season is finally here, Lou. First weekend of September is always a good one for football memories, but not always great memories. We're going to start this one 30 years ago, going back in history to September 8th, 1984. It was an opening season loss to Purdue. And not a great start to a career for someone who ended up having a really great career at Notre Dame.
You know, the irony is that game was played in Indianapolis. The Hoosier Dome had just opened, and that's why the Indianapolis Colts moved from Baltimore there because of the new stadium there. But they decided to move the Notre Dame home game against Purdue to Indianapolis, and they took about a caravan of 140 buses with 6,000 students down there. On the opening kickoff, now remember, Notre Dame defeated Purdue the previous year, 52-6. Purdue was 3-7-1, just really thought to be an awful team. But the freshman handled it, Tim Brown, and he bobbled it and ended up losing the ball at the 13. There's a photo in the Notre Dame Sports Information Office of that opening kickoff, and Tim's eyes were as huge as saucers. You could see it, and he fumbled it away. It set up Purdue's score, and eventually, the Boilermakers ended up upsetting the number 8 Irish with Jerry Faust as the head coach, 23-21. So, not the auspicious beginning you wanted, and I can imagine that there were a number of murmurs in the stand saying, "Who's that Brown kid? He'll never amount to anything."
Right. So yeah, if a freshman this weekend has a poor start, and not all is lost. Eventually, Heisman winner Tim Brown, of course. But it wasn't always bad news. 10 years later to that day, almost, another Heisman hopeful didn't end up as well for him. But Ron Paulus made his Notre Dame debut, and that was a 42-15 win over Northwestern.
I think a lot of Notre Dame fans remember that game very well because Ron Paulus was supposed to be the starter in '93 and then broke his clavicle a week before the opener. And even while Kevin McDougal was leading them to the #1 ranking, it was, when's Paulus returning? He was probably at that time, and still might be, the most hyped recruit ever in Notre Dame history. So the anticipation was just building for that opener, and he didn't let anyone down. Even though his arm was sore and everything, 18 of 24, 291 yards, 4 touchdowns, gave a young man the game ball who was sitting in a wheelchair. I mean, it was like you want to talk about the guy with the wide hat and everything. And of course, at the time, ABC publicized it as perhaps the most important debut of a college athlete since Lou Alcindor as a basketball player at UCLA in '66, who later became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And then the famous statement by Beano Cook right after the game that Ron Paulus will not win 1 but 2 Heismans at Notre Dame. And Ron ended up having a very good career, but it's like if I were to say to someone, I got the greatest joke in the world. No matter how funny it might be, people will say, it wasn't that funny.
Tough to live up to all that hype. Going back to Brown for a minute, can you think of any other Notre Dame players who have had that rocky of a start and then kind of gone on to redeem themselves pretty quickly?
I remember quite a few. Jerome Evans became the all-time leading rusher, fumbled on his very first carry in 1975. He broke George Gibbs' 58-year rushing record and all. And Joe Montana threw an interception on his very first pass that same year. So you see that happen quite frequently, and it turns around, and then you have the reverse many times where somebody scores on his first career carry and then you never hear from him again.
Well, there will be plenty of freshmen making their debuts here in September, the next couple of weeks for Notre Dame, both on offense and defense. Chances to set themselves up well, or maybe have a few mistakes that they can overcome down the line. But we'll be going through those on a weekly basis here in This Week in Irish History. That's going to do it for this episode, but stay tuned to blueandgold.com for all of your Notre Dame news.